Good evening. Tonight to hear the shir by Rabbi Pinchas Winston. The shir tonight is being recorded via Facebook video live and MP3, and the links will be sent out to anyone who requested in the next few days. Just to let you know that at the back of the shul, Rabbi Winston's books are available for sale. I want to personally thank Yehuda Shamroth for backing, spearheading, and organizing tonight's amazing shir and getting it off the ground. Thank you, Yehudis. Unfortunately, she could not be here tonight with us in person, but I know she's here with us for sure. I also want to thank two specific people, Cheryl Brenner for collecting the entrance fees, and Sally Henning as well, and anyone else I might have left off. I ask everyone to please turn off your cell phones, beepers, and any other devices that you may have so not to disturb Rabbi Winston during his lecture. I also ask to please do not ask questions during the shir, as per Rabbi Winston's request, and kindly ask them at the end of the shir when it concludes. If there is a need, there will be a Marav Minyan at the end of the shir. I am privileged and honored to present you Rabbi Winston tonight. I have known Rabbi Winston for over 11 years, and every time I hear him, I am always captivated and blown away by his topic and shir. It is a pleasure and honor for me and the community to once again host you, Rabbi Winston. Rabbi Pinchas Winston, just to give you a little background, is an author and internationally known lecturer on so many topics of Torah philosophy, including the Torah's attitude towards money, suffering, knowledge, Eretz Yisrael, relationships, and so many other topics of the day. All are well based on Torah traditional sources and provide important insights on how we make the most of life. The famous topics of Rabbi Winston is the topic of Geula and current events. He has written and produced countless essays, books, CDs, videos, and he is even on the radio on the message of spreading Geula. Rabbi Winston has taught at Esha Torah in Toronto, Esha Torah Jerusalem, Neve Yerushalayim Seminary, Neve Zion, Telstone, and most important, more recently, he has lectured in Canada and the United States and England. I welcome you to tonight's shir of preparing for the final redemption. I hope you enjoy tonight's wonderful and insightful shir. Thank you all for coming. Without any further ado, Rabbi Pinchas Winston.
First of all, also I thank Judas and Reuben for being point people for me, that I can make a phone call or send a message and things get set up, but I can just show up, and then everybody else for coming, and I acknowledge all the familiar faces for a long time. It always sounds different to hear the world's final redemption from somebody else. It's like it feels uncomfortable a bit because of the whole redemption type of reaction that people have to the idea, to the concept, and how basically it pretty much goes undiscussed. People talk about Mashiach a little bit here and there more than before in the past, but not nearly as much as they should. I'm going to divide the shir up in basically 1 through 2/3 parts, because the first part is relevant both to what we're talking about this evening and also in terms of Hanukkah, which is coming up, because there is no better preparation for redemption, for Geula, than Hanukkah. Hanukkah was the last Chag that the Gedolei Dor Chazal gave to us before we went into this long Galus Edom, which clearly we're at the end. And it didn't just have the seeds of redemption for the future, but it actually left with us the information that we know we need to have in order to be able to prepare ourselves for redemption. There's a couple books in my personal life that literally changed my whole perspective. This is one book I actually brought this evening. My nephew actually pointed out to me. It's called Achris Kereshis, written by, I forget his name. His name is Ari Shapira. I think he lives in the old city. Haskam, everything. Basically, the Sefer, very, very fascinating Sefer. I just happened to start to learn it. And the title, Achris Kereshis, means the end is like the beginning. Meaning that whatever took place at the beginning of history is the paradigm, it's the template, so to speak, for redemption in the future. What happened in Galus Bavel, Mitzrayim, all these different things which many people have spoken about and I've written about quite often, but even more so than I would have thought. And some books you read and they're interesting and they're fascinating and they're insightful. Other books, they can change your life. They can change your whole viewpoint. Basically, the Sefer is based upon the teachings of the Vilna Gaon, the Gra, and the Ramchal. And nobody argues with them. Everything they say seems to carry weight. It's not so controversial. The Sefer Kol HaTorah, which is one of those Sforim that personally changed my life, is a very controversial Sefer because people dispute whether or not the Vilna Gaon, he actually wrote it, whether it came from him or his Talmidim. And as a result of that, a lot of people leave by the wayside. But if you look in this Sefer, you'll see pretty much the things. This Sefer is not controversial because these are all coming from the sources, the Quran and Michal, that are Yedua, they're known, and they're verified. Even though they're very similar to the things in Kol HaTorah, but this Sefer you certainly can rely upon, and he's saying pretty much the same thing. And it's all about preparing for the final redemption. And you read Sfarim like this, and you realize that our mentality, the way we look at the whole concept of redemption and preparing for it and living for it, is very different than it once was, and the way it's supposed to be. This Shabbos alone, it was a concept, an insight which I'd never heard before, from the Sefer. I learned about Chavrusa Shabbos afternoons with somebody, and we came across something. After all the years of learning, and especially learning Kabbalah, after a while it gets difficult to be awed by something. Torah is awesome in itself, and it's always interesting, always fascinating, but every once in a while you see a concept that really, it's like, that's amazing. And it changes, it's almost like being nudged in a different direction, a way of thinking. And there's been many in this Sefer that I've seen like that, but the one I saw, the Shabbos in particular, was talking about the Beis Hamikdash. Was talking about the need, and we'll get to that as Hashem towards the end, but talking about the need to yearn and to want the Beis Hamikdash, why it's so important to be focused. And literally, every day, David Melech, he looked up from his palace, and he said, how is it possible for me to live in this wonderful palace, and the Aron HaKodesh is living in curtains, behind curtains. I got to build the Beis Hamikdash. And Nassim said, well, you can't do that because you have blood on your hands. You fought, all the right reasons. You fought holy wars, the real holy wars, on behalf of Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but nonetheless, the Beis Hamikdash is a place of shalom, it's a place of peace. And, yet that wasn't your life. But you can draw up the plans. It'll be your Beis Hamikdash. And the Gemara says, to make that point, that after David died, the Beis Hamikdash was in his honor. When Shlomo came with the Aron HaKodesh to go in the inauguration of the Beis Hamikdash, he tried to get in, the doors wouldn't open. Right? Did you bring the keys? No. Did you bring the keys? No. Doors would open. And he tried this pasuk and this pasuk and this pasuk, and finally the pasuk that mentioned David Avdecha, the doors opened up. The Gemara says, then everybody knew for sure it was David's schus, the Beis Hamikdash was built and was available to us to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we were supposed to. So I just assumed David couldn't do it. Shlomo could. We had to wait until Shlomo was old enough. He was the Melech, and he continued on with the initiative that his father started, and he built the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gra says no. He says David couldn't build it, but the people in his generation could have. He didn't have to wait for Shlomo Melech. It could have been even Shaul Melech. It could have been all the generations before that. So then why wasn't the Beis Hamikdash built in those times? Because he was the first one to have such a cheshek, such a need, such a drive for the Beis Hamikdash. Everybody else didn't care that much. It wasn't top on their agenda. So because of that, the Beis Hamikdash didn't get built until later. It could have been built in his time. He personally could not build it, but his generation, they could have, if they were dervish. They wanted it, but they didn't want it. It's a big problem. It's a big problem in every generation, except in those generations where we're suffering, when we really need Mashiach, when we feel that we can't go on and cope with the reality the way it is. So now we start thinking, Mashiach has to come. Redemption, where is it? We need it. But the better times, those are the times you have to want it the most. Because look around. We're like David and Melech, living in the palace. We have good lives for the most part, Baruch Hashem, compared to previous generations. But on the Temple Mount, there's a mosque. And surrounded by that, right, surrounded the mosque are churches. And that's the makam of the mikdash. That's the makam of the shechina of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we're looking at our window, we're saying we can accept that, we can live with that. That doesn't bother us. You make the bracha Bonei Yerushalayim, because Baruch Hu should build Yerushalayim. We should be thinking to ourselves, get rid of that mosque already. And the churches, and bring back the shechina. It's got to be in our mind, our mindset. Just want to read you a couple of quotes. First of all, this might be well known to people, but it's worth repeating and taking into consideration. The Gemara says, more in Shabbos, on Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph, that's 31a. The Gemara is talking about different things. It's a lot of Agadata, a lot of Midrashim on these couple of pages. And the Medrash is talking about how, on Yom Adin, when the person stands before Kodesh Baruch Hu, on their final day of judgment, the Gemara says that, this is what Rabbi is speaking, he says, when a person is brought to judgment, they say to him, did you conduct business faithfully? First thing they're going to ask you. It's a tough question to answer in the affirmative. It's very hard. Money is a very strong influence in people's lives. It's not so easy to always do things honestly. But that's one of the first questions they ask. It says, did you designate times for Torah study? Right? That's obvious. Did you engage in procreation? Did you try and have children? Did you anticipate redemption? So peacefully Yeshua. One of the 6 things, I can think of a whole list of things I would assume they're going to ask me on Yom Adin, and say peacefully Yeshua, anticipating the redemption is not one of them. Maybe somewhere down the list. But the Gemara is saying, no, it's part of the 6. They ask you. So what is it? What's say peacefully Yeshua? What does it mean to anticipate the redemption? Okay, we'll get to that. Hashem. Second quote. This is from Rav Elchan and Wasserman. It's actually quoted by Elialopian in Lev Eliyahu, and he says the following thing. I heard in London from the holy Rabbi Elchan and Wasserman, quoting the Chafetz Chaim, that our rabbis say that the war of Gog and Magog will be threefold. It's supposed to be 3 wars of Gog and Magog. The good news is 2 of them have already happened. The bad news is there's still one lingering, still hanging over our heads. So he says, right, after the First World War, the Chafetz Chaim said that it was the first battle of Gog and Magog. And then in about 25 years, which is quite a prediction because that is exactly during World War II, a second world war would occur. It would make the first one seem insignificant. And then there will be a third battle. Rav Elchanan concluded that one must suffer the pangs of Mashiach, and that's not 100% true, but we'll see what that comes down to if we have time, B'ezras Hashem. He says, however, the wise man will quietly prepare himself during that time, and perhaps he will merit to see the comforting of Zion and Yerushalayim. Quote number 2. The emphasis on preparing. There has to be some kind of preparation done. We just can't sit back and let things go in a passive mode. Something we're supposed to do. Something we're supposed to participate in some way. The third quote. This is coming from a sefer called Or Yechezkel, Musa Geula, Rabbi Yechezkel Levenstein. He was the mashgiach of the Mir Yeshiva in Poland, and also when he came to Israel, also as well as Panovich in the 60s. And he's talking actually to the base medrash in Panovich. He says the following thing: the Sefer Mitzvahs Katan, which was on the mitzvahs, a commentary on the mitzvahs, wrote in his explanation of the positive mitzvah, "I am God, your God, who took you out of Egypt." That it, and I'm just taking the parts that are relevant over here. That is the basis of the mitzvah of the Gemara that says at the time of a person's judgment after death, they ask him, "Did you anticipate redemption?" According to this, belief in the future redemption is included in the first of the 10 commandments. The idea of Tzapis Yeshua, anticipating the redemption, is part of the first of the 10 commandments. Very important point. He says, but if we look at ourselves, when we examine ourselves, it's as if we've given up on them altogether. However, Anyone who's not involved with these matters is far from having any true faith. Most of the Shemona Esrei deals with the future redemption, and just as we're lacking faith in this matter, we are also distant from the essence of prayer, and all of our prayers are only lip service. You look at the Shemona Esrei. How many tefillas we say 3 times a day, 2 times a day, depends sometimes a person davens, right? But in the Shemona Esrei, there are several brochas we make every single day that discuss the concept of geula, redemption, and all the things that are supposed to happen because of it. The Gemara, in a few places, actually goes from brocha, it tells you why they're arranged the way they are. The whole Shemona Esrei actually details the process that the Kodesh Baruch Hu uses to go about setting up and carrying out redemption. And every time a person says those blessings, they go through the Shemona Esrei, just rattles them off, they miss the entire point. He's calling that lip service. What's wrong? Why aren't we getting it? What's missing? So, the first thing that you have to do for the sake of preparing for the final redemption is you have to change the way you look at reality. We have been living in the Western world amongst the Gentiles for a very long time. We haven't had a Beis Hamikdash. We haven't seen miracles on the scale that once took place at the time of the Beis Hamikdash and before. So we basically look at the world the same way the rest of the world looks at the world in history. And that basically seeing is believing. What I see, that's what I believe in. More or less the Greek approach, the scientific approach. If I can't quantify it, if I can't qualify it, if I can't put it into, under a microscope in some laboratory where I can look at it and examine it and take it apart and see it in some way, even though you can't see atoms anyhow, the electrons and things like that. Most of physics is theoretical today, but still there's a simile to it in the reality. If I can't look at it on such a level, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't exist. Of course, Hanukkah came along and taught us just the opposite. Hanukkah told us and taught us that believing is seeing. 2 ways of looking at reality. Seeing is believing. What I see, I can believe. It's tangible. I can touch it. I can relate to it, which is not untrue always. But more important than seeing is believing is seeing. Somehow, what I think about, what I conceive of, what I can imagine, will affect the way I perceive reality. That's a very, very important point. Because perceptions are based upon assumptions. And if your assumptions are incorrect, your perceptions are incorrect. The whole point of learning Torah is to compare our assumptions with God's about life and reality, see which ones match, see which ones don't. The ones that don't, we get rid of. The ones that are on target, we keep. And that allows a person to perceive reality the way it's taking place. So, for example, right, you look at this city, right? It is a city. The Mat Beit Shemesh is massive. It's funny because for a while I was coming here mostly at night, so I couldn't really see what was going on here. I just saw what was lit up. I could avail. One day I remember coming a couple of years ago already, coming during the daytime, and literally I couldn't keep my eyes off the construction. I looked around, and then my son moved out here, so we're coming here more often to visit him and all that. So every couple of weeks we'd be out here, and another community went up, and another road goes off to this direction. All of a sudden there's more buildings, and just building and bigger and bigger and bigger. And you drive to Yerushalayim, and there's cranes everywhere. And every day I go, not every day, but when I go on the highway back and forth, and I see the expansion, just the highway. When I used to drive back here at night, I used to teach at nights here and go back to Telsted at nighttime on the highway that used to exist, a little single highway, one lane. I cannot tell you the frustration. One of the reasons I stopped teaching was because of that highway. Going back at nighttime, I get stuck behind a truck for about 15 minutes, trying to get around there where there's construction. But either way, at the end of the night, you're tired, you want to go home. And it would be just like so slow. Now, it's actually fun. It's actually fun to drive on the highway. And it doesn't make a difference what time of day. You come rush hour, not rush hour, The drive, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, almost from door to door. I mean, Baruch Hashem, where we live is right close to the highway as well. So as long as there's no highway back, but it's just, the construction, and then they're changing the highways to Yerushalayim and building tunnels and everything. Even years before all this was taking place, I remember coming by the first time the new airport, the extension of the airport, the new terminal. And I thought to myself, what's the point? Do we really need this? Is this a good use of money? I mean, I understand we're an international city. We have to compete. Everybody has to, put on a show for everybody else. and okay, but still, this is a country with so many poor people. And then I realized, yeah, we do need this. You know why? Because in just a little bit of time, there'll be more people coming through those airports, those terminals, than you can possibly imagine. So why do we need all this new rail system and all these, the trains and the highways? At one point in time, it seemed like we had no money for anything. I mean, how long we had to wait to finally get this turnoff to Telstone. We didn't have to go all the way down to Abu Ghosh, there's a long, and now a beautiful, nice turnoff that I also enjoy. Don't have to stop anywhere, take a risk, go across the highway, but, Kibbutz Galius taking place. How many people here are from America? Yeah. The 51st state, no? When they first began to speak about Aliyah of foreigners in Golda Meir's time, she told everybody, forget about the Americans. They're not going to come. They're not going to come. So they went after the Russians. I remember going downtown Toronto and marching, against, was Kosika, whatever the guy's name was, and trying to get the Russians, because forget about America. They're not going to come. The life is too good over there. Over here, it's not, and you look around today and how many Americans and Canadians and British and South Africans, not just the Russians. The Russians, in fact, came more later on mass when they finally opened the doors wide. So we just take that for granted. What does that mean? Well, let's go back in history. Let's go back, in time. But we'll do that shortly, B'ezras Hashem. The point I'm making right now is that how do you look at that? So one person says, well, countries expand. Countries develop. Eretz Yisrael is just another one of those countries that does it. So therefore, it's a big deal, but not such a big deal. But who says it's a signal of anything to do with Achrus Yamin, the end of days? Who says? I can't see how it could be anything but that. Somebody else says, I can't see how that could even be anything like that. One of us is wrong. And I've gotten discussions with people about this. And we argued the point. It didn't take very long for the person to realize his perspective was based upon nothing. Mine was based upon source after source after source after source after source after idea after source after idea. You do the work, you get the information, it changes your perspective, it gives you the vision, the eyes. Avraham Avinu is traveling with Yitzchak, Yishmael, and Eliezer. It's the Akedah. The Kodesh Baruch Hu has told him. He's told, bring him up as the Akedah. Everybody says to kill him, but bring him up as the Akedah. Avraham is under the assumption he has to carry through and actually kill him. So, bring him up. So they go up for 3 days, not exactly knowing where they're going. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, when the time comes for you to know where you have to go, I'll give you a sign. I'll give you a signal. So Avram looks up after 3 days. The Torah tells him, he lifts up his eyes, he looks up and he sees the Shekhinah over Har Abayis, Har Maria, right? He sees the Shekhinah. So he realizes that's the simon, that's the sign that this is the place that Kodesh Baruch Hu wants him to go with Yitzchak. But he's not sure even Yitzchak should go. So Medrash says, he actually asks, he does a little test. He says to Yitzchak, he says, what do you see over there? And Yitzchak says, wow, it's amazing. I see the Shekhinah over the mountain. So Avram says, well, obviously, you're meant to come with me. So he says to Eliezer, what do you see, my trusted servant? And Eliezer says, nice mountain, clear view, nice clouds, sky, fantastic, but nothing more than that? No. What about you, Ishmael? Same thing, right? Same weather report. no Shechina. So Avram says to the two of them, he says, you stay po ima chamor, while we go ko v'nishtachaveh v'neshuva. Right? You stay po with the donkey, ima chamor, while we go over there, bow down to Kodesh Baruch Hu, come back. So Chazal point out that Abraham wasn't simply using two location words over here. The gematria of po in the kola, you had one for the word because that means it's rooted on a higher level. Po is 85 plus 1 is 86, which is the gematria of Elokim with the hay. Ko, where they're going, right? Ko is Chof Hay, 25, Chanukah, right? Ko, where they're going, is 25 plus 1 for the kol is 26 is Yud Kei Vav Kei. So Avram is saying to Yishmael and Eliezer, since you cannot see the Shekhinah, you can't have that vision. Your eyes do not allow you to see things that way, that where we're seeing it right now. You stay here with the donkeys. That's all the donkey sees too. But we're going over there, to the Shekhinah, because Ko is another name for the Shekhinah, which is why so many prophets began their prophecy with Ko Amar Hashem. It's a vision. It's a way of looking at the world. Hanukkah came to teach us how to look at the world that way. But you'd be surprised how many people don't. In fact, so few people actually do. And because of that, we're blind to things taking place right under our nose. One of the main questions you have to ask about Jewish history, something that bothered me for the longest time, is that why is it everywhere we've gone in history, the Jewish people have gone in history, why is it that we're always caught off guard at the end? We always get stuck. I mean, there's two possibilities. Either God plays tricks with us, he doesn't tell us, he doesn't let us in, he just does the whole thing at the last second, says, surprise! And it's not usually a pleasant one. Or he tries to communicate to us and tell us what he plans to do. And some people see it, and most people don't. Why is that? Certain lack of ability. It changes the way you look at reality. For example, when Yakov Avinu is by Lovin, right? He's living with Lovin for 20 years in the end. One day he comes home and he hears his brothers-in-law talking about him, about how he's getting rich off their father. A blood libel. Until that time, he didn't, got along with everyone perfectly fine. Okay, no problem. And all of a sudden he hears this and it shakes him up. And then he notices that Lovin does not smile the same way today as he did yesterday. And that bothers him. He comes home. He tells Ruch and Leah, we have to go. It's time to leave. We can't stay any longer. Why? Excuse me. Why? Because your father didn't smile the same way today as he did yesterday. So what would you say to that? Well, not everybody is happy every day. Maybe he had some bad investments in the stock market. Maybe it's what he had for lunch. How is that a sign that we have to go? So Yaakov says, because you have to understand, there's a halachahi, that Rashi brings down in this week's parsha. Halachahi, Esav sona es Yaakov. The way of the world is for Esav and Lavan, and the truth is, most of the world, not to like the Jewish people. That's the natural way. Until Mashiach comes, that's the natural thing. If they're being nice to us, that's unnatural. That's not normal. So every single day I wake up and I see that Lavan is being nice to me, I scratch my head and say, wow, what an ace. I don't go, well, he's come a long way since I last met him. He's changed for the better. I can rely upon this, I can live with him for a long time. No, I understand. Lovin is being compelled to be nice. How? Because Hashem is doing to him. Yaakov has a job, he has a purpose, he's there for a reason. To accomplish something. So Kosh Baruch Hu is helping him out by making Lavan nice to him. by making his brothers-in-law nice to him. So the moment they start to show their true colors at that time, Yaakov says, uh-oh, it's a big dam, you have this big, huge dam holding back water. And on the other side is tons of water going, we got to get through this wall. They're pushing, the water is pushing against the wall. Got to crack this wall and drown all the villagers down below. And the wall's going, I won't let you through, I won't let you through. And every day someone goes out and he walks across the wall looking for cracks. Why? Because with all that water pressure on the other side, what difference does a little crack make in a big, huge concrete dam? The difference between drowning thousands of people, if not millions, if it happens to break. Because of all the pressure behind, the crack pushes the crack, starts to, the whole wall can come down. So when Yaakov sees a little crack in the exterior of Lovin and his sons, he says, I'm out of here. I'm out of here so fast, I'm not even going to stop to say goodbye. But think about it for a second. These are the questions we don't ask so much. We read the Chumash, it goes right by us. But it's bizarre. You know why it's bizarre? Because Yaakov's working for Lovin all this time. He's not taking care of his own personal wealth. And finally the time comes to get rich. He wants to go back home. They make a deal. And Yaakov says, he kept switching it. I said this type of sheep, and it became that type of sheep. They all, it's a whole mess over here. Now, how does he actually multiply the sheep? It's actually quite neat. We sit back and say, wow, look at that. He takes a stick and cuts into the stick, and he does who knows what kind of Kabbalistic incantations and Yehudi, who knows? But somehow he makes all these sheep, and he becomes very wealthy in 6 years. Now, if you were the brothers-in-law watching this take place, what would you say when you saw that happening? What would you say? First of all, I would say, this guy's a sorcerer. Doing voodoo or something. I don't know. They didn't know about Kabbalah so much, his brothers-in-law. But even if they did, what were we doing until now? Until now, everything was normal. You went out, took care of the sheep for our father, did everything supposed to, it's all normal. All of a sudden comes time for you to get rich, and you're using all kinds of mystical, suspicious powers over here, right? That's going to get resentment. That's going to lead to all kinds of backlash. And then Yaakov is forced to flee Lovin while the guy is away taking care of his animals and doing his business and all that. And he sneaks away. What's social media going to do with that one? What's it going to say? So it tells you, Yaakov stole again the heart of Lovin. And that's after he stole the bruchas from Esav. Way back, then, and, what is going on? I mean, for somebody who's called Ish Emes, it's such a convoluted, backwards way to go about doing what has to get done. But just look at the way it appears in the eyes of everybody else. Why does it be like that? Okay, so it gets Yaakov on his way home and all that. I don't know people's political affiliations. I gave up on guessing that a long time ago. I learned my lesson the hard way. Talking about one person, one politician, which I thought that the other person supported, only to find that was not the case. But whatever's going on right now in the States, right? With this what's going on here is part of the whole picture too, but leave that for the time being. Whatever's going on in the States right now with this whole Trump impeachment process. Sometimes you can see things better from a distance than you see things close up. Chush ben Dan, what does he do? Esav, they're fighting over, Mar Machpelah. Yaakov is dead, waiting to be buried inside Mar Machpelah, and Esav, comes up with a star. He bought it, belongs to him, he wants it. They're arguing back and forth, the Shvatim, there's a whole debate taking place. And Chush ben Dan, what does he do? He sees this taking place. He sees his grandfather waiting to be buried as a bizayon. It's a disgrace. He can't hear, he's deaf. So he can't hear the discussion, which is a good thing, because if he did, he might get pulled into it and lose his perspective. But because he can't hear what's going on, but he can see what's going on, he can see. He walks up and he knocks Esav's head off. I don't know if I'd want to see that. But that's what he does. End of story. And his head rolls into Mary Pellick. That's the only part that was allowed to get in there. And Yakov is buried. Sometimes you stand back and look at the situation, so you have the situation taking place, and the way that it usually works, unfortunately, and we learn from Yakov Avinu that the only way to get Jews to detach themselves from their host countries outside of Eretz Israel is anti-Semitism. So is anti-Semitism racism? Well, we've discussed this before in the past. Anti-Semitism is not racism. That's the biggest mistake a person can make. If you assume it's racism, you're in danger. Racism, for the most part, takes place when people are different. It's the differences that make people not like one another. But anti-Semitism, it's been proven, has been the worst in places where the Jews are most assimilated, where we're the least amount of vigilance, or whatever the word is, in the eyes of everybody else. It's not racism. It resembles it in some respects, but it's not. It's a dialogue. Anti-Semitism is HaKadosh Baruch Hu talking to the Jewish people. And he starts mildly, and he a few things here and there, tells us it's time to go, it's time to go, it's time to go. Yeah. I don't want to go. So he talks a bit louder. It's like, I remember that I used to, try to get my kids to clean up when they were much younger. Now, Baruch Hashem, they clean up a lot, but when they were younger, it was a little harder on Friday afternoons to get them to clean up. And we'd stay about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Shabbos coming at 5 o'clock, 5:30, and tell them, clean up. They say, just 5 minutes. So you're right, 5 minutes, I can afford that. Right? You come back 10 minutes later, and of course, they're sitting in the exact same place, playing the exact same game, making twice the mess they made 10 minutes ago. And you tell them, I asked you to clean up. Just 5 minutes. And you already said just 5 minutes. Now I have to start cleaning up. And this goes on back and forth for a little while, to eventually get to the point where it's getting so late, you have no choice but to raise your voice and shock them to clean their mess up. Get that stuff and put it away. Shabbos is almost here. Didn't say it's the right way to do things, but it happens a lot of times. And then they have the audacity to say, you always yell at me. You never talk nicely to me. I did. The first 15 times I tried, but, that went like over and through and under, and, and only when I got to that point, it was the same thing, Kosh Baruch Hu, I was like, he's talking to us. Prepare, get ready. Things are coming, things are happening. Just like, so eventually he has to raise his voice. Anti-Semitism is a Kosh Baruch Hu raising his voice. We learned that from Yakov Avinu. We're supposed to learn that from Yakov Avinu. And the moment he understood, he saw that, he was out. He was gone. If you look at it, it was so mild. There was nothing much going on. He could have waited longer, seemingly. Well, there are other issues too. That's a different point. But as bad as it was not that bad. I've often said that the Jewish people's greatest trait or ability is our ability to adapt to situations. We somehow we land on our feet and we work it out, we build ourselves up, and the most negative trait we have is our ability to adapt to things. It's always a double-edged sword. In Mitzrayim, it was bad. You know how long did the slavery last for? 116 years. Has anybody ever asked themselves why it took so long to get out before Kosh Baruch Hu finally heard the Jewish people? You know why? Because people came home and they could always be worse. But Paro but it could always be worse. Tomorrow it was. Well, it could always be worse. And we just kept saying it until finally Hashem said, well, if that's the way you're going, then I'm going to put a Paro into power who has some kind of disease, whose physicians are going to tell him the only way to get rid of it is to bathe in Jewish blood, and they'll take the babies and they'll take the blood and they'll bathe in it, and finally you'll say it can't be any worse than this. And then they finally call out, and of course Baruch Hu finally hears them, and he finally redeems them. Where were they until that time? It can always be worse, it can always be worse. No, it can't, it's not supposed to. Kadosh Baruch Hu, he doesn't want to go the full distance. The Gemara says there's two possible ways for Mashiach to come. Achishena b'ita. B'ita means at the last possible moment. Achishena means early. What does early mean? It means you prepare. You become a partner with the Kodesh Baruch Hu in the process. Don't wait for him. I always imagine, Kodesh Baruch Hu up in Shemayim, looking down on us, and we're down here twiddling our thumbs, going, when's HaKadosh Baruch Hu going to bring Mashiach? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu twiddling his thumbs, going, when will they bring Mashiach? And it's a standoff. Who can twiddle their thumbs the longest? He usually wins. So, perception is a gift. It's a gift you have to ask for. You can't simply assume you're going to have it. We say every day in Shemona Esrei, Atah chanein la'adam da'as u'lamed u'nishbina deya bina v'haskel. Right? Because Baruch Hu, you graciously give a person das. Das is a very important key word in Kabbalah and everyday life. Right? That's the whole issue, this idea of das. Knowledge, but not just any knowledge. Because we know there's two types of knowledges. Right? There's the knowledge of the Eitz Das Tov Ra. There's the knowledge of the Eitz Chayim. What's the difference between the two of them? Well, the knowledge, Eitz Das Tov Ra, the knowledge of good and evil, that's just basically, how the world works. How you can use the world, how you can harness the power and the capability of the world in such a way that you can make your life, more enjoyable, enhance it, and ideally that you can do mitzvahs better. That's the ideal thing. But, we do it for all kinds of purposes, all kinds of reasons. The Eitz Chayim, wisdom, vision, das. The eyes, the ability to see not with your physical eyes, but with your mind's eye. That's very important. Avram says to Yitzchak, you can come with me, because you look at the world the way I do, the way God does. Them, they just see the physical world. They're stuck in seeing is believing. Until it actually happens, like right in front of them, they don't accept, they don't believe it. But we can change the world and change the reality, and we can hasten the redemption. We can bring it about because we can envision it before it even comes. We can figure out what has to take place. But with Siyata Shmaya, with help. So, this idea is hugely important. You learn this from Noah. Noah matzah chen b'nei Hashem, and because Noah is matzah chen, because he finds chen, which of course is the root of Chanukah, because he finds chen in the eyes of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, he survives the flood. And we know that it can't just simply mean he has a nice smile, but he brushes his teeth and he flosses, and all these things that make your smile look so nice and so pleasant. I like his smile. I think I'll save him from the flood. I'll destroy everybody else because they don't smile the same way. Chen has to be more than that. So it's a das. There's a machlokus, there's an argument going on. How to look at the world. Noah sees it one way. It's his das that allows him to survive. Noach matzah chen b'nei Hashem means when Noach looked at the world through the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he understood what life is about. He understood what he should be doing. Not enough, not like Abraham, not the same degree, but enough to survive the flood. So I want to show you something very interesting. We have two major rabbinic holidays, Hanukkah and Purim. What's the symbol of Hanukkah? The oil. The donuts, Sifganiyot, still the oil. The dreidel, it's also part of it too. We'll get to that in a second. Light, but primarily, what was the Gemara say? The Gemara says the following thing, okay? It says, when the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they defiled all the oils that were in the sanctuary by touching them, right? As a result of that, they became tamei. And when the Hashmonaim overcame them and were victorious over them, they searched and found only one jar of oil, which was a miracle unto itself. It was placed with the seal of the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, undisturbed by the Greeks. And there was sufficient oil there to light the menorah for only one day. A miracle occurred, and they lit the candle, the menorah, from it 8 days. Shem and Zayis. The olive actually was a symbol of Greek society, but Shem and Zayis is the symbol of the light of Torah. And so you light it, you ignite it. What's the symbol of Purim? The Grogger too, yeah, but what's the symbol of Purim?
Turning things upside down.
Well, that's the story of Purim. What's the symbol of Purim? Hamantashen. That's good enough for me, right? But what is the ultimate symbol of Purim? It's so obvious you probably can't even think about it.
Hashem is hidden.
No, I don't mean that. That's the story. That's the message, right? But the symbol, sorry,
Lots or chance.
the poor. That's all part of the story. Not just I'll give you a hint. The Shem Zayis is for Hanukkah, so then wine. Now, what's interesting, you have the wine comes from a grape, right? And the olive oil comes from an olive. That's not so interesting. That's just the reality. But what's interesting about the two of them is that the olive, to look at it, first of all, it's very bitter. You can't eat it unless you pickle it first. But you would never know there was oil inside the olive until you would squeeze it. Once you squeeze it, the oil emerges, and lo and behold, amazingly, you light it and you get light. So it's as if there's light inside the olive the entire time. Didn't know that. You squeeze it, it comes out. Wine is the same way. If you cut a grape open, just cut it in half, you don't get wine. You get grape. It's wet, but you don't get the wine. How do you get the wine? Is you squeeze it. You squeeze it and the wine comes out. It's the same way that you get Shem Zayis, the symbol of Hanukkah, so wine is the symbol of Purim. And they're really two sides of the same coin with one fundamental difference. What's the difference between the olive and the grape? Well, the olive is bitter. You can't eat it. You have to do something to make it edible. But the grape is delicious from the beginning. As long as it's ripe, eat it, tastes delicious, it's fantastic. So what's the difference between Purim and Hanukkah? Well, Purim, you have all these mitzvahs. Hanukkah, you have almost no mitzvahs, but the menorah itself. So we mentioned the grogger and the dreidel, right? What's the difference between the grogger and the dreidel? The dreidel you spin from the top, and the grogger you spin from the bottom, right? Is that coincidental? Apparently not. It was symbolic of the type of redemption that each one, what occurred at the time of Purim and Hanukkah. By Hanukkah time, it began on top, because Baruch Hu created an incident, because the Jews were prepared to live in the forest and hide from the Greeks and Syrians because they were so greatly outnumbered. And because Baruch Hu said, no, he made something happen. He spun it from the top, so to speak, with the incident with the pig and Matisyahu, the whole thing. Got the blood boiling. They killed a Greek. Now they're in trouble, right? It's either do or die. And next thing we know, there's a revolt taking place, and the whole thing unfolds, and the miracle of Hanukkah occurs. So the dreidel symbolizes the hashgacha pratis involved to make the miracle. So Hashem spun from the top, and we spun at the bottom, so to speak. You follow? Purim is different. Mordechai is the instigator. He even had a din of a rodif. They actually talked about killing him because he was endangering the Jewish people. Endangering the Jewish people. Because he was going out of his way to antagonize Haman. But because of that, the whole Purim story unfolds and the miracle takes place. So we spin the grogger from the bottom in order to be able to symbolize the idea that we initiated the Gula process and Akash Baruch Hu responded instead. So the dreidel from on top, Akash Baruch Hu started, Hanukkah, right? That's Hanukkah, Purim, right? From the bottom, and we did, and Akash Baruch Hu was the one who brought it about as a result of our actions in the end. Which one's right? Well, this is actually part of the argument between Yosef and his brothers in these parashiyot. The brothers are holding by Purim. They're holding as Purim. Purim meaning that we have to take things into our own hands, we have to make it all happen, force the issue, and Akash Baruch Hu respond. Yosef is more the Hanukkah approach. A lot of connection between Yosef and Hanukkah itself, right? But then, ultimately speaking, what's this difference? So there's a beautiful little medrash that Rashi brings down in Parshas Noach. It's well known. It says that Noach, when he sent the Yonah out, the dove out in Galus to look for dry land, it says that represented the Jewish people being sent into Galus Yavan. When the dove came back, a dove is also one of the nicknames for the Jewish people. When the dove came back with the Ali Zayis in his mouth, that symbolized the Jewish people using Shem and Zayis at Hanukkah time to light the menorah. The light of 25 should come down upon us and bring about the redemption. A lot of connection between Noah, Cain, Noah, Hanukkah, right there. But the Medrash asked the question, Ali Zayis, an olive branch, where do you get that from? It's not a tall tree. Olive trees are very short. You look at them, they're not very tall at all, right? So what happens? So he flies looking for an olive branch, but not close by. The first trees you might see are like cedar trees and elm trees and oak trees. They're the higher trees. The olive trees low down. So where do you get it from? So it says he flew all the way to Eretz Yisrael for an Ali Zayis because the flood didn't go there. The flood did not enter Eretz Yisrael, so all the trees were visible, and the low ones too. So the dove went all the way. That's why it took such a long time to get back. It's a long journey. Went to Eretz Yisrael, found an Ali Zayis, took it back in his mouth, and brought it back to Noah. So imagine this the question, why? He was just looking for dry land. He wasn't looking for Shem and Zayis. He wasn't looking for an olive branch. He wasn't looking for peace. He wasn't looking at whatever. He was just looking for a branch of any tree to say that the waters were subsiding. So then why did he do that? Why did he bring back this Ali Zayis? Says the Medrash, to give Musar to Noah. The dove was into Musar. He gave some Musar, a nice lesson to, we're getting off the ark. The whole world just got destroyed. Now let me tell you why. And don't make the same mistake because I don't want to do this all over again. This flood business. So here's why I'm bringing back this Ali Zayis to you. I love this. This is such... I don't know if the dove actually spoke these words. He said it, whatever. It doesn't make a difference. I just imagine this little dove sitting there, back and forth in his feet, notes saying, where'd you get that from? There's this row. Wow, all that way, why'd you do that? Well, I want to tell you something. And then this little dove turns to Noah and he says, better that my food should be bitter like the olive branch, but from the hand of God, than sweet from the hand of man. That's why you went all the way just for that? I mean, couldn't you just written it down somewhere or, put some graffiti on the wall of the ark or something, and say, and I would have learned the same thing. Why'd you have to go get, this olive branch that's tied to Hanukkah in some way? Better that my food should be bitter. Wait a second. What do you mean bitter and from God? I would have thought, and I'd assume that food from God is supposed to be the sweetest and most tastiest food you could possibly imagine. The bitter stuff should come from human beings. So what is the bitterness? Well, it's not that the food itself is bitter, but we human beings like to have control. We want to control ourselves, other people, the world, the environment. We love it. It's comfortable that way. We hate having to guess what's going to happen next. We like predictability, except when we can control the lack of predictability. We'd like to know that if I do this, this is what's going to happen. The sun's going to rise the same way tomorrow as it did yesterday. We want to know that we're in control. So many people cannot accept the concept of God only because they cannot stand the fact that their paycheck is going to come as a result of a miracle, as opposed to a weekly paycheck that comes regularly, loyally, every single week. But you know what the truth is? God signs that paycheck. No, my employer does. No. God signs that paycheck. No, you look right here. It's my employer. This is his name right here. God, the same name as God? No. God gave you the job. God gave the company the money. God made sure that they write the check every week, that you get your check, because every once in a while, when you lose track sometimes, the most obvious becomes the least obvious, and what should never go wrong does go wrong, and the money should have been there, but it's not for some reason. He's got ways of shaking things up to show isn't the case, but the bitterness from the hand of God means that I look at everything as being in the Shemayim. And I understand that as consistent as things are in life, everything is a miracle from day to day, from moment to moment. One of those mind-blowing things, I can't even comprehend what this means, but one of the most mind-blowing things the Nefesh Chaim brings down, he says that we talk about Kush Baruch Hu's Mechadish Ma'aseh Bereishis B'chol Yom. And the Nefesh Chaim says, not just B'chol Yom, but every single second. You know that this second is being Ma'aseh Bereshis all over again? I always thought he did it once a long time ago. Flick the switch, put it into motion, and it's just rolling right into the end of history until he dismantles the whole thing at some point in time. No. Every single day, he's starting from scratch. But as a chesed, he makes it seem like the next moment continues on from the previous moments. So you have a sense of accomplishment, of growth. I can't fathom what that means, but I just know one thing for sure. Life is a phenomenal miracle every single second. And we say, Kadosh Baruch Hu, open my eyes that I can see the wonders of your Torah. There's a lot more to say about this idea. The only point I'm trying to make right now, this was the first part that was supposed to take 20 minutes. Okay? So I have another 2.5 hours to go. The only point I'm trying to make with this right now is that the first step in preparing for redemption is changing the way you look at the world. Telling yourself, understanding that whatever I think I see, there's so much more to it that I'm not seeing. Seeing is not necessarily believing. Believing is far more important for seeing than the other way around. And if I open my eyes, and this is the story that encapsulates the whole thing so beautifully. It's like, everyone's got a favorite story in Tanakh, I think. This is like one of my favorite stories. I got 2 favorite stories in Tanakh. This is one of them. The other one has to do with Shlomo when he dies with his sons and all, but this is, what happens? The kingdom of the Jewish people split into 2. Kingdom of Israel, kingdom of Judah. Yehuda to the south, Israel to the north. Aram is somewhere, I guess, where Syria is, today, or was. And they want to attack the Jewish people, so they actually lay a trap. In secret, of course. And they're waiting and waiting and waiting, and the Jewish people never show up. So the king of Aram says, okay, who spilled the beans? Which one of you told the king of Israel what I planned to do, that they knew not to come here and be stuck in this trap? So his Rabbi, whatever, says to him, his right-hand man or his general says to him, he says, no, there's no one here who's done that. But there's this prophet called Elisha, his name is Elisha, and he knows what's going on in your most secret moments and places in life. And he told the king of Israel what you plan to do, and he knew to avoid it. So King Aram says, well, okay, if that's the case, let's go get Elisha. So where is he? He's in Dosan. So they went to Dosan, surrounded the place with their army. You know the story, right? You know the story? They surround the place, and Gehazi, who's his right-hand man, who's the Rabbi of Elisha, comes outside, he wakes up in the morning, comes outside in the morning, looks around, he sees hills covered with soldiers, an army, and he says, boy, are we in trouble now. And he goes to get it, and Elisha comes out, he says, look, master, we'll never survive this. And Elisha says, nah, nothing to worry about. He says, what do you mean nothing to worry about? I mean, I know you're a prophet, can do fantastic miracles, but this massive army going to wipe us out. What do we do? There's nothing to worry about. If you could see what I could see, you'd be calm too. And then at that point in time, Elisha turns to Kadosh Baruch Hu. He says, Kadosh Baruch Hu, please, open the eyes of the lad, of the boy, the nun, whatever, and show him what I see. And he opens his eyes. He sees hills filled with angels on horses and all kinds of things. A massive heavenly army. I don't know exactly how they fought the war after that, right? Sennacherib came with about 185,000 troops, surrounded Yerushalayim, and there were those who wanted to surrender, and Chizkiah wasn't sure what to do. So Yeshaya told him, don't worry, okay? No. So as an act of faith, Chizkiah not only prayed to Kadosh Baruch for a miracle, he went to bed. He went to bed. I had difficulty falling asleep just listening to the buses go by. How do you sleep when there's 185,000 people? I guess if it's your last one, you do the best you can, but surrounding instant doom. And he goes to sleep to show HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I believe. And the next morning he wakes up and they're decimated. A plague. Whatever it was, right? They're decimated. And this is the end of Sennacherib. He gets killed by his sons in the end. Massive miracle that no one else could see. But he saw it. Gehazi opens his eyes and he sees, whoa, unbelievable. How many angels fill this room right now besides yourselves? How many angels, what's going on over here? We see a whole world, a massive world. You know, it's an amazing thing. There are over 1 billion Arabs in the world today who, for the most part, do nothing but plan or pray for the end of the Jewish people in this tiny little country. And here we sit, you know, mostly awake. It's pretty good. Here we sit, having a shir, going home, making Shabbos. That's not a miracle? When they first started the state, it was questionable. People wondered, is God really behind us in this thing? This is really a chiluk of Geula. Well, you know, it's like a strange thing, because you go back into Jewish history, there's so many things that in retrospect we now say, oh yeah, that was clearly, I mean, Ruth and his daughters, and Yehuda and Tamar, and this goes on and on and on of David HaMelech, you know, who was completely rejected even by Shmuel HaNavi in the beginning, ends up becoming the king. They thought he was a mamzer. It's like convoluted, to say the least. And yet, we're living on the other side of it. Oh yeah, of course, David Melech, Tzaddik, father of Mashiach. Oh, it makes perfect sense to me. The whole story of Bathsheba, you know, this Bathsheba is the mother of Mashiach. They lose their first child. David did things prematurely. You know, gave everybody else what to write about, the rest of history. The whole thing, David Melech and Tzaddik. In retrospect, looking back in time, you can see how the whole thing plays itself out, but we have that vantage point. You can't begin to imagine how many people living through the moment missed it completely. Didn't see what was really going on. Didn't understand what the opportunity was. So Gehazi opens his eyes and he sees and he understands there's so much more to life than what he sees. Unfortunately, he learned the lesson a little too late. He lost out in the end, but that one he won. That one he saw. So, let's just go through a few things. Just before finishing up. Number one, you may recall, we've spoken about this before in the past. People have difficulty with this. It's hard to understand, hard to imagine, but this is what it says. History is not open-ended. Number one, it's not open-ended. The Gemara says it lasts 6,000 years for very specific reasons, for Kabbalistic reasons. People can argue the point, doesn't make a difference. The level of Kabbalah, 6,000 years. We are in 5790, 5780. 10 years will do. 5780, that's where we're right now. That's a lot of time. That's what, 220 years until the end of history. Except for one problem. Because history has two ending periods that have to occur. They have to occur so much that the Gemara says anybody who does not believe in them occurring does not go to the world to come. They can believe in Torah, mitzvahs, the whole thing. They can believe in the world to come. But they have to believe in Yemos HaMashiach and Techis HaMesim. 2 periods of time that to take place. When did they take place? Well, you know, whenever Mashiach gets here. Well, at least whenever he reveals himself. More than likely, he's here for sure. Not even more than likely, he's here for sure. I don't say this room right now. But Moshe Rabbeinu, you understand, Moshe Rabbeinu walked the face of the earth for 79 years. 79 years of slavery. He was walking the face of the earth, and in his 80th year, that's when God tapped him on the shoulder and said, go. And his father doubted his ability to be Mashiach in his time. 79 years. He was here already, and no one saw but Miriam. Only Miriam. Until finally Moshe was actualized as Mashiach. His father let him see either. I think the batteries are going. His father let him see either, right? No, even Zipporah. I don't know what she saw in the end. But when it was all said and done, and Moshe Rabbeinu had to reveal himself, everybody finally understand. Oh, that's who he was. He came down to Mitzrayim to free the Jewish people. The first time he came down, they got excited. Mashiach, he's finally come to save the Jewish people. But the slavery increases. Now where's your prophecy? Now where's your Mashiach in the end? And 6 months later he comes back and does the whole thing. I mean, you know how difficult it was? How many people believed in him? By the time he got to Paro's palace, they all dropped away. They all got afraid and concerned and nervous and all that. That's us. Who wouldn't do the same thing? Story after story after story. So many different examples of that. I can tell you one thing for sure. We're all going to be shocked. We're all going to be shocked. It'll be running our noses. Because how can I say that? Because that's the way it's gone through all of Jewish history. It's a pattern. God says, you must look at the pattern, look at history and understand it so you can prepare yourself and recognize it when it comes. So you can see with your mind's eye and not just your physical eye. That's hugely important. So according to the Zohar says the Chis Mesim, resurrection of the dead, which is after the period of Mashiach, comes after it was all said and done, is somewhere between 210 and 214 years. Remember this? We spoke about this lots of times. It means that history is perfecting itself. There's no Bechir. Bechir is long gone. It's not the world you recognize today. It's a whole different level of reality. This is what the Zohar, this is not a prediction. This is not a prediction. This is what the Zohar is saying. The Lesson brings it down. This is considered to be acceptable fact. 210 to 214 from 6,000 backwards. Out of 220, we just knocked off 210 to 214 years. And between there and today, Mashiach has to do his stuff and finish off the world. So when all of a sudden you've got people in the House of Representatives, Jews, leading the pack against the president, thinking that they're only just Americans like everybody else is. That's not the way the Gentiles look at us. The Gentiles, they don't look and say, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Hasidic, Litvisha. They don't ask those questions. Were you born a Jew? That's all they care about. Hitler, went one step further. Were you kind of half Jew? Like, was one of your parents Jewish? Good enough for me. He didn't go the halachic route. He was machmir about this. They usually are in the end. And someone gets some Christian pastor gets on the radio, gets on TV, national television, in front of an audience that probably includes millions of people, and goes ahead and says, you know what's going on right now? This is called a Jew coup. That's what he calls it. Because the people who are leading it, the most prominent people, are Jewish. Vision, right? So they look at themselves as being Americans. This is the American thing to do. Certainly debatable. Not even debatable. It's not. This is the American thing to do, right? To do what they're doing. They look. I'm not Orthodox. I'm not conservative. I'm barely affiliated with the Jewish people. So don't look at me as a Jew. Look at me as an American. The Gentiles go, no. We look at you as a Jew, and therefore this guy continues and he says that they're coming for us. This is the Jews coming for us. And you know what happens when they come for us? Millions of Christians die. And he's talking to millions of people. Now you plug that into the computer. It's got all of Jewish history plugged into it, and the Chumash, and Nach, and Navi, and Midrashim, and the whole ganzen Torah is plugged into this computer, and you put this little scenario inside. You say, computer, what does this mean? And the computer's going to tell you, well, based upon past experience, this is God. This is God telling you, exiles come to an end. Come on. When did the four exiles? We have four exiles, right? The first one is Bavel, 70 years. Misuyam, we understand exactly when it begins and exactly when it ends in the end. We weren't sure at first, but later on we figured out. Galus Yavin, we also know, right? The angels go up, the angels go down. Galus Bavel and Galus Medai, then Galus Yavin. Okay, the last one is Galus Edom. Goes up and he goes up and he goes up, and it seems like he doesn't come back down again. So we get this idea. It corresponds to the word tahom in the second verse. Long exile, the Roman exile. It changes hands, but it's always the Romans, the Holy Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, then Europe, but it's Rome. The Third Reich. You know why? I never even knew this before this year. Do you know why the Third Reich was so important? Because Europeans, and not just Europeans, but the Europeans who became Americans too, They wanted to call Washington Rome in the beginning. They wanted to call, what's that river called? The Potomac. They wanted to call it, what's that river in Italy called again? I used to know these things. The Tiger, what? Tiber, the Tiber River. Tiber River, right? That's what they want to, because, why? Because they wanted to be the Third Reich. The Third Reich has a very negative connotation today because of the Nazi Empire. But the Third Reich was just the next Roman Empire. That's all it was. So the Americans also saw themselves as being the potential extension of the Romans. That's Esav. There's three parts to Esav. They're all scattered across the world, but Galus Edom is the last one. So when did it actually begin officially? In 63 BCE. That's when Pompey came and destroyed Jerusalem. By the way, anyone can go anytime they want to. I'm over time here. But instead of coming back a second time, I'll just try and finish off what I can tonight. So that's when it begins. When he comes and the Hashmonaim, they lose the monarchy, they lose control to the Romans. Pompey comes and destroys it. What's 2,000 years later? 2,000 years corresponding to the Tohu that corresponds to the Roman Empire. It's 1938. Anything significant happened in 1938? Kristallnacht, out of nowhere. People didn't see it coming. Not exactly, but it was very, they even spent the houses too, by the way. Not just stores, but houses too, and communities all over the place. Kristallnacht is considered to be historically the beginning of the Holocaust. The official end of Galus Edom. What continues on after that is Galus Yishmael. Except that Galus Yishmael didn't begin when Galus Edom ended. Galus Yishmael began a long time ago because the Medrash says, the Zohar says, that the Tsar of Yishmael came to Kadosh Baruch Hu and said, what's the schus to have Eretz Yisrael? And Kadosh Baruch Hu said, Bris Milah. So Sarah said, but Yishmael also did Bris Milah. So, Hashem says, yeah, but, he doesn't do Priya, he does meal itself, it's kind of empty. He says, but I'll tell you what, just shortening the whole Medrash. So I'll tell you what, since he did do Bris Milah, right, therefore I will give him the land for a period of time while it's empty. And he will be the one to interfere with the Jewish people coming back and taking the land again, Kol Zman, that he has the right to be there. So how long is that right? So 100 years for every year of age he did Bris Milah. So how old was he when he did Bris Milah? 13 years of age. 1,300 years. When did the Arabs basically take over the Temple Mount, Yerushalayim? In 648 CE. 1,300 years to the date is 1948. Now there's two ways to look at this. Coincidence, right? Galus Edom coming to an end. Just when the Medrash predicted it would, thousands of years before it could know the future. On the money. And literally, Galus Europe comes to an end. The Jews go to different places in the world. They could have come to Israel. Between 1933 and 1939, the Havara Agreement was bizarre, completely bizarre. The Nazi Party worked together with the Jewish Agency to allow Jews to escape, to leave Germany with their possessions. Because in the beginning, it just had to be Judenreich, free of Jews. 60,000 Jews took the opportunity, and they're living today in Israel, and their families, descendants are all here today, and they built up houses, their families all here. 100,000 Germans did not take up the offer, did not come. Why? Because they said, we are just as German as the next one. And they all died in the Holocaust. Kadosh Baruch Hu opened the door. Rav Kohaneman was laying the foundation stone of Panovich Yeshiva as the Germans were coming up from the south. This was before the Battle of El Alamein, right? They began to bomb Tel Aviv. The Jewish Agency was shipping out their materials and their correspondence and all that because they thought, that's it, we're going to lose the land once again. Rav Kohaneman was laying the cornerstone of Panovich Yeshiva. And they're asking, why? It's going to amount to nothing in the end. So Kosh Baruch Hu is not going to let them in. This massive army is taking over Europe. The Americans have a difficult, and Rav Kahana, he won't let them in, and they didn't come. And the Arabs who were waiting to join up with the Nazis and destroy the Jews of Israel, didn't happen. Didn't happen. Because he saw, he understood, he had that level of vision. You know, you have to change the way you look at things. Look at the highways. Look at the building. Look at the aliyah. Look what's going on in the world. Look at the anti-Semitism. Look at all of it, not with the seeing is believing attitude, not with the Gehazi before he opened his eyes, but with the Gehazi view after he opened his mind and could see the world that Elisha saw and HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him. And then you begin to realize the Gula is taking place. It's well in progress. We're a part of it. We're living through it. Yeah, I know. I'd also like to have some, bigger signs like sea splitting, and it would be nice if God would talk to me every once in a while and tell me what He plans to do next. I keep sending him emails. They keep coming back. Apparently, he doesn't use social media the same way we do, but just something. Just tell us and show us and reveal it. Make it clear that nobody can doubt it. That day will come. When that day comes, you lose your free will. You lose your bechir. You lose the chance to be a shutaf, a partner with the Kodesh Baruch Hu in the process of redemption. Hanukkah is about to begin. It says, the Zohar says, the first 24 days of Kislev correspond to the 24 letters of Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso and the Ed. I'm just about to finish right now. The 25th day of Kislev corresponds to Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. What does that mean? 24 days of Kislev, the build-up towards the victory and all that. Yakov Avinu, the Torah tells us, he wanted to reveal Kates Hayimim, the end of days, to his sons. Parshas V'yechi, right at the beginning. He gathered together and tells us what happened, Achus Yamin. And then he goes on and does something else instead. Other business, blesses the Jewish people, blesses the sons instead, Shvatim instead. So, what happened? So Rashi explains the prophecy left him. He wanted to, just imagine had that prophecy been told, and we'd have it today, we'd know what's going on. Shvatim didn't get it, they weren't zocher to it, seemingly. So therefore Yaakov said, okay, it's gone, it left, nothing to talk about, I'll move on to other business and I'll start blessing my son, the Shvatim, like I'm supposed to. The Gemara is not happy with that. The Gemara says, no. What happened? What really happened? What went on over here? So, Yaakov is about to reveal in the days, the prophecy leaves them. At that point in time, the Gemara says, Yaakov turns to his sons and he says to them, okay, anybody here not fixed up yet? And we had a rough ride over here, things have gone wrong, back and forth, you sold your brother, like crazy, the lying, But has anybody not done tshuva shlema? That the prophecy would lead me because Abraham gave birth to Ishmael and Yitzchak gave birth to Esav. Maybe somebody here is not metukan, not mesudar, not beseder b'chlal. So they all answer back and say to Yaakov, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And the Gemara explains, just like God is one in your heart, so God is also one in our heart too. And Yaakov comes back and he says, what? Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso. They're all Yotzi, Kriya Shema, the Bruchas, and nice family dialogue over here. Right? You come home from a hard day, say to your spouse, how was your day today? Oh, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu. And yours? Oh, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso. Like, what are you talking about? What's the discussion over here? So the Gemara doesn't explain. The Gemara stops there. The Gemara goes farther than the pasuk, but stops there. The Zohar goes the rest of the distance. And one of the most important parts it says in preparing for the end of days is Razia Torah, the secrets of Torah. And this is one example why. The Zohar says that when he said that Yakov Avinu wanted to give Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam 25 letters like the Shema. But he didn't. You know why? Because the unity that was expressed through this expression that the 25 letters would have had wasn't there yet. Evident by the fact that the prophecy left him. So he wasn't satisfied with their answer. Yeah, he said the Shema B'Seder, but it's not 100% true. We see this, by the way, in the Parsha, because later on they lie about Yaakov saying, don't kill us, and Yosef says to his brothers, am I in place of God? So you see that, they don't have it quite yet together. And Yaakov senses this because the prophecy leaves him. The only question is, the Zohar doesn't explain this, the only question is, which letter did Yaakov leave out? He says, the Zohar says that the 25 letters were made up later on in part when the Mishkan came, because the Mishkan provided that unity, and therefore the first verse of Parshas Vayikra, after it says Vayikra Hashem el Moshe, there's 25 letters, that makes up the 25 letters. But beyond that doesn't say very, very much. But the question is, what letter did Yaakov leave out? Sometimes, like in the Torah, for example, it says the Ma'orot, the lights, the Vav is missing. It's called Chaser, so you can add the Vav inside, because we have our vowels can be either strokes or they can be dots. We can, we can replace them, and therefore it can be Chas, and still have the same meaning. But in the word Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus, there's not one letter missing. So which letter did Yaakov leave out? So, there's only one letter he could possibly leave out. The Leshem explains. Rosh Shlomo Eliashiv says that the Shema is the Yichud of the upper world of the angels. What does it mean? It's their vision. In the world above, where the angels exist, there's no questions about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's no questions about Hashgacha Pratis. They see the world that we're going to see it in the Mot Mashiach. They're 100% clear. That's the yichud of the angels that we copy when we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. You have to have intention for that. For us, it's more of an emunah, but they actually believe it. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusol Le'olam Ve'ed actually is the yichud for the world that we live in right down here. But since we can't see the Hashgacha on the same level that the angels see it, we whisper it because it's more of an emunah than a fact until Mashiach comes. There's only one day of the year where we actually say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso out loud. It's Yom Kippur, because in Yom Kippur we're supposed to rise to the level of angels and see the world the way they do. So now we can say it together. You know which letter is missing? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Ve'ed. Right now we say them as two distinct verses. Shema, no Vav, just Baruch Shem. They have theirs and we have ours, and they're very different. But if the brothers had risen to the level of vision of Yaakov Avinu, and they had been able to attach the Vav to the word Baruch, and make it a continuation of the Shema to Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus, that little Vav, the prophecy would have been given over, Achris Yemim would have come, all the history we've gone through that's been negative and never occurred. That little Vav, which symbolizes Yosef as well. It's pointed out, and I'll leave you with this thought, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Ved, the letters of B'Shechem Lamed Vav. Lamed Vav is a number that corresponds to the canons we light during Hanukkah. There are 36 tzaddikim. It corresponds to the Or HaGenuz. That corresponds to the Chov Pei that Abraham saw. In Shechem, because Shechem was where things went wrong for the Jewish people. But you'll notice, in last week's Parsha, after what happened to Dinah, the Pasuk says, Yaakov remained quiet. Who can remain quiet a moment like that? Who can say something when that's happened? Yaakov wanted to say something. He felt compelled to say, but he didn't. You know why? Because he was making a point. Yisrael, kisarisa im Elohim v'im anashim v'tuchal. Because you fought with angels, you fought with men, and you prevailed. You prevailed in which way? Physically? No. You never lost sight of the fact that everything is from Hashem. Everything is a message from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. My job is to make myself into the kind of person that can see them, that can read them. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu will open my eyes and not just show me the wonders of His Torah, but show me the wonders of his history, of his redemption process, empowering me to be a part of it. Thank you.